All right. Well, today we have Father Aaron meeting with us to do a collaboration. And if you haven't yet checked out his channel, The Dungeon Minister, I highly recommend it. It is not only fun to watch, but very informative. And I find very good for creative thought processes as well, because you can pull a lot from just watching his videos and seeing how he looks at his games and his campaigns and the basic systems that he uses, which I'm very familiar with and fond of. So definitely check out that video.
Thank you, Joe. First of all, I just want to add in, because it's a mutual appreciation society, how much I enjoy Green Oaks. The deep delve you do on a topic, and you'll pick a relatively narrow band, and you will just go deep on it, and that's lovely because there's a lot of layers here, and that's part of when I'm going to start an adventure within a campaign or a campaign. It's the attention to detail, which I'm not great at to start with. Like I tend to shoot first and ask questions later, and so I end up designing myself into corners. So I appreciate the sort of careful thought that you put into things.
And today we're going to be talking about story arc, dungeon design, and how they intermingle, help each other, and rely on each other for aspects of GMing.
I was thinking on the way here that one of the great gifts that I've discovered that sort of is given to game masters is actually history. When you're going to design an arc, and you want to design a campaign, we're talking about a high level thing. You want your characters to be following in this world for a while. I have found so much quality in mining the historic events. Just as the saying, the truth is stranger than fiction, right?
Very much.
So to find the big thing that's happening in the world that maybe your low level characters are too weak, they're too unimportant to influence, but they're going to get carried along by it, and you're thinking like Luke in Star Wars was nobody at the beginning of Star Wars. He's a moisture farmer on a dead planet, right? Frodo is just this little hobbit off in a place that nobody's even heard of, most of them, These characters aren't big, important people, but they get swept along in something. So thinking of the big scale stuff, what is the big stuff that's happening? And that is, movements of armies. That's a change in the climate. That is the death of a great leader that upsets an entire kingdom. And then thinking, how does that filter down? So, Frederick Barbarossa, invaded Italy to try to get the Italians to love him, and then he drowns in a river. What is that going to do? What's the death of the emperor going to do? The Germanic tribes sweeping into the Roman Empire. How is that going to upset things? Where are the people that they displace going to go? Because they're going to get kicked down the road, right?
Yeah.
I find if I start with something on that level, whether it's out of history or it's something that I'm making up, I can then follow through the thought process of, well, what is that going to do to, Joe Magic User, who's just got his shiny new spell book and he's got his 2 spells and he's all ready for adventure. Well, what's that going to do to him?
I actually appreciate you saying that, because one of the things that I think about is how real events shape some of my storytelling as well, because there is so much is even now still being discovered. I think about recently I read an article on some digging they're doing in Pompeii, and they uncovered, a big villa and a food stand that had, murals painted on it and everything. And again, thinking about effects like that, when that destructive piece happened, what did it do for the rest of the regions and everything? And of course, the people that were involved, but yeah, how does that affect things? And that's one of the things I think about a lot as I'm writing what I call my backbone of the story is, what's the big catalyst that nobody is going to be able to have an immediate impact on,
right,
but it is going to be that narrative that drives forward, that eventually, in some way, shape, or form, will be a confrontation to the characters in their development.
It starts them on a journey, and because we're playing, fantasy, we're not playing reality. The real world, that little magic user with his two spells ends up getting squashed, right?
Right.
But because we're playing fantasy, eventually that little magic user rises to be someone who does impact the world, but they get there slowly. The other thing, I mean, you talked about that the fruit stand in Pompeii. There's this massive event, but that's someone's fruit stand. That's their little business, and someone bought their mangoes there. Do they have mangoes in the Mediterranean? I don't know fruit
No.
geography. Someone got their grapes there. Oh, so that's safe.
Yeah.
Someone bought their fruit there, and maybe they were in the process of hand and changeover when the first rumble happened, right? Because it sort of started slow and built up, and then they realized, oh, this is going to be serious.
Yeah.
But it was the first sort of tremors, and Vesuvius acting up again. Here's your change, right?
Yeah.
There was a moment like that, and those are the moments that you play the game at. You play the game at those moments, but they're impacted by so much before it and beyond it, and where the opportunities then lie. For in this moment, this person is going to take the heroic step. They're going to be the one who, and the players expect to be that person. They're playing the game. They're not looking to be Joe Schlub getting kicked around by history.
Yeah.
So they want a chance to step up and to be that figure. So you give them those opportunities. Okay, Vesuvius is erupting. You've got to get people to the boats, right? That's today's adventure. Just get people to the boats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
I think one of the kind of interesting things too, as we're looking at story and looking at that high level piece, what are those big moving and shaking pieces? One of the things that I find very interesting, and it may be different, but there is a large amount of players that initially start where they don't care what the story is as long as they get to play. I really want to give those big details of what's going on. And it's interesting to me how a large amount of people just initially they don't care about that. It's just they focus on, my character and what it is. But through that being the catalyst of the start of the adventure, having them then understand the impacts that single event has draws that deeper appreciation for it later. I just think it's an interesting balance that I've seen between players. Some of them really want to know the story so they can build, the optimal character to address that story. Some of them, they don't care what the story is. Right. So on ones like that makes me think of that fruit vendor. He doesn't really care. He's going about his day to day. That's just a non-issue. Vesuvius is just a non-issue until it isn't.
And the great thing about the players who don't want to know the full story is that, if you're a fruit seller in Vesuvius, you don't care. But eventually you're going to have to. And so the potential to unfold it slowly. The emperor is moving. The emperor has passed, but that something big is happening. That much. There's a big event happening. Maybe you participate in it, but you're participating as, one of the hoi polloi. You don't know what it's all about. You don't know the inner struggles. Maybe you see the emperor up there on the dais with his family. You don't know that there's a power struggle within the family. You don't know that the uncle is scheming to murder the emperor. You don't know that the cousin is in love with, you don't know that stuff. You just know there's the emperor. And so that stuff begins to slowly unfold. You find out, so there's suddenly a whole bunch of Germanic, tribesmen rushing around killing people. You've got no idea what's behind that. You have no idea what's driving them forward. So that begins to unfold slowly, and the character discovers the world, sometimes along with the DM. I mean, like I said, I shoot first and ask questions later. I design adventures and then think, okay, how does that, what does that mean? I'm getting better at this. When I was a teenager, when I was gaming as a teen, I just wrote stuff and there. But now sort of retrofitting it and saying, okay, well, oh yeah, that can be something. So I've written things in this latest campaign I'm doing with my kids. I took some care to plot out the world, to plot it out, but then later I would write something in and say, oh, maybe that could be connected over here. And so even as they're discovering it, I'm discovering it, right? But if you do that groundwork of the big world stuff, then those opportunities become more frequent and more rewarding because it pays off. I mean, there's nothing better than laying something down in an adventure and then 3 sessions later, 6 sessions later, the players go, oh, that's that thing. That's that thing we did. That's a great feeling. Like you just lay it down and then they pick up the connections. You don't have to spell it out. They pick it up.
Yeah,
That's what's
absolutely.
so much fun.
Said I'm kind of the same way too. I like to have I do call it my backbone and then a couple of ribs so that I can keep things planned out a little bit, just so I can do some of the pre-work and have things tied together and be of the same form and body. But for the musculature and the flesh of that story, I really do rely on the players to help fill that in because just on the Vesuvius example, if while they're working on getting people on the boat, whether or not they get on the boat and which boat is going to make a big impact on the next part of their adventure.
And if they cheese off the captain as they're doing it,
Right, right. So much story can come from those initial pylons of what we want to build. I found that as things like that progress too, not only does it help because the players don't feel railroaded, but that starts drawing them in as well. Having their interactions actually make a difference to the upcoming adventure, really, that's where I start seeing, the players who don't initially take that vested interest and want to know that big picture piece. That's where they start getting drawn more and more and more into it. As every piece that they plug into that story has a dramatic output on the development of their characters. So it really does become something that's cooperative and really reliant on their participation to unfold.
Yeah, I like that term, dramatic output. Like it's a deliverable. You've put in these choices and you've made, and here is the resulting, victory, loss, tragedy, comedy, whatever it becomes. This is what's coming out of it, and the living with consequences bit. I mean, I had my boys went on an adventure when they ended up starting a war. I mean, essentially.
Yeah.
And it hadn't been something I had planned or thought about, but they were certain it was going to happen. And I thought, well, maybe that's a logical consequence. So, okay, there's a war, right? And so, yeah, it's a whole other chapter. But because there was a frame of, what's going on, it fit. Now, the thing in this, though, is I also like your classic side quest kind of thing. You're playing your main campaign. We had several adventures fighting gnolls and kobolds. We had a group of kobolds who'd been taken over by gnolls, and so the gnolls were bossing them around and running the show. And we'd have, I don't know, 3 or 4 sessions on these gnolls and kobolds, and we we're just kind of getting tired of gnolls and kobolds. So I started throwing in just a side quest here and there, and they weren't massively tied to. In fact, they could have not happened, and the adventure still the main arc still would have happened. But I like to, when doing that, then find something that can. So it's still set in the same world. So I had one in the sewers of a city that's south of where they live, and my whole thing is there's a mini ice age that's starting. It's either been started by a white dragon or the ice age has allowed a white dragon into the area. But I had something further to the south. It's like it was a side quest. It had nothing to do with anything. It wasn't a big level up. It wasn't anything like that. I decided the bad guys there would be lizard men, and they were that far south because they were feeling the cold too, and they were moving down, and they'd come into conflict now with the capital city. So It had nothing. It didn't have any bearing on it. It wasn't necessary for the plot, but I still kind of wanted to put it in the same world, so you'd recognize the landscape, if
Yeah,
you will, the sort of narrative landscape. But those, the classic sort of just let's just go on a dungeon crawl and fight a bunch of goblins, right? I mean,
yeah,
you can still do those. It's just about making sure they don't have to drive forward the main arc. They just can't conflict with the main arc.
absolutely. I've found something too, speaking of side quests, that allows me to pull things that I've done before that either I was really happy with and want to, kind of relive and get other people into it and get their feedback, or something that I've completely botched that I want to redo.
Yeah, and you want to keep the stakes have to keep mattering,
Yeah,
right? So if you've got this balance of power problem, and then suddenly you drop in a dungeon with 150 goblins, well, where were they when the wars were raging? Why haven't they been a factor yet? And so yeah, you just have to find ways to make it happen that doesn't totally disrupt the whole balance of it, right? You don't. It still has to make sense. It still has to make some sort of narrative sense.
as we're talking about that, sprinkling in some of those and starting with our initial story ideas, I've noted that for me, as I'm working on some of my dungeon designs, a big part of that initial story I use kind of guides me.
Yeah, it has to the individual dungeon has to be consistent with the world. It needs to have some resonance with it, and sort of emphasize. Say need to. No, you don't need to. You could play a random bunch of dungeons, and it's a lot of fun, right? For people as story obsessive as yeah,
Guilty.
there we go. For us, I think we need to own our own, pathologies. Uh, but so, here's a classic example. I watch a lot of terrain crafting videos, and Black Magic Craft, one of the best. He's Canadian. We
Yes.
proudly own him. Um, he has this modular wizard's tower. It's great. It works. You can make it as tall as you want, short as you want. It's fabulous. I started building it. I don't have a place in my world right now to put this thing. There's no reason in the story, and it actually wouldn't just not forward the story. It would start to sort of like throw things off. Like, well, where was this guy when? Why is this? So I'm making this tower every night. I'm staying up till 1 or 2 in the morning making this tower, and thinking about what'll be at this level, what'll be at that level. And meanwhile, I've got no place to put it. So I'm starting now to spin out where it can go, because its form and its function have to work.
Right.
If you go into a set of caverns and they're supposed to have been made by the dwarves originally, well, then there should be quality stonemason work. There should be good stone cutting work. It should be quality. But then later they were taken over by goblins. Well, there you should begin to see where they've made alterations and repairs, and it's not as good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's cobbled together a bit. It's strong, but it doesn't look good. They don't care how it looks. They just need it to function.
Right.
If it's a kobold lair, then there's going to be there's going to be murder holes. There's going to be ambush spots. As opposed to a place that the kobolds have been stuck into that wasn't theirs, that they didn't design, and then they have to improvise that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the place has to, in order to fit into this story, it needs to speak the same language. So your beach at Vesuvius, are you landing on a friendly shore? Is it a rival city? Is it a rival, is it, Vesuvius is a historic place, but if you're going to transport this to a fantasy game, maybe the next island over is unfriendly.
Yeah. Very much.
So how's that gonna shape your decisions in the boat? How's it going to shape your decisions once you land? And how will it be physically different than the place you've left? It's safer, presumably, but yeah, all those things start to shape the rationale for the design of the dungeon. Have you ever designed some rich, complex encounter, and then your players just play right around it?
Oh, absolutely.
It drives me nuts.
Absolutely.
Drives me nuts. But you
That's
can't, I mean, you can't grab them and no, you will go here. You know, they have to be able to make those choices, and then you end up on something that, okay, well then, you know, you're in this place, and so some wolves come by, right? You know, so you're gonna, they decide not to go to the orc island. They decide to go to this other island that you drew as a blob on the map, but you've got no idea. And
yeah,
so then it's um roll wolves appear.
yes,
Wow, why
yeah,
not? You know, so there is a place for the random. There is a place for the random. I think, you know, when making a dungeon, and I sometimes will look at the random monster tables, right? The you know, the wandering monster tables, and I almost never use wandering monsters because I plan wandering monsters, right? Like I
yes,
say, there's a at this time there's a creature that's going from point A to point B, and depending on how long you take to get there, he's going to be somewhere on this route, right? I'll go there. But when I do use a random a wandering monster table, I'm rolling it and saying, well, there's no reason for a flock of sturges in this place. We're we're 3 levels underground. How do they get food? How do they get air? I mean, no.
yeah,
So I just end up, you know, doing the work anyway. That's
yeah,
my own obsessive compulsive nature, though. I have to
yeah.
admit.
Same thing, same thing. I think one of the that I found early on, it really frustrated me a lot as I did design something really rich and spend a lot of time thinking about. They didn't even, I mean, in and out in 2 minutes kind of deal. And
Yeah,
it was very frustrating for me, but I found that unless I have a very committed idea and group who really speaks about what they want to do and what they want to accomplish, I've learned to read my players and know kind of the levels of details that I should put in based
yeah.
on them.
Yeah. Knowing your players is a huge thing because I mean, I played with my kids, right? So I've got an 11, 9, and 6-year-old. I'm not doing any complex court intrigue about, you know, love affairs and incest. I mean, that's just not going to fly around my kitchen table.
Right.
But that the thing about those details when they don't get directly picked up, there's a couple of things that, on the one hand, as you see, you can bring it back later, right? Because it got glossed over. Great. Well, I'll just package that up nicely and include it in, you know, some future adventure. The other thing is, um, I don't speak or read any of the Elven languages that Tolkien developed for Lord of the Rings. I can't speak, you know, the Black speech of Mordor or the Dwarvish languages. But the fact that they're there adds a depth. I mean, it's not even something. It's not even words you read on the page. There's a depth when he describes things. It may not appear in the description, but you know that there is a wealth behind that. And so it comes out just as the air you breathe. And so they may not pick up that this color was the color they only had back then and all that. But there's a richness to the environment that they wouldn't be able to put their finger on, but does make it a better experience.
The more uh, immersed we get the players, the more invested they are, the more engaged they are too, which is a huge boon for us.
Yeah. And we enjoy it too, right?
Yeah,
Because we should
absolutely.
be having fun too. It's not just about the players. We should have fun too.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things that many new GMs, because I do a lot of coursework with GMs who are just starting out. And one of the first things that I think they tend to forget is that it's not just the amount of workload. It isn't just about, you know, being there to referee for the players. It's about having your own type of fun too.
Right. Yeah. It is a game. It is a game. I will say the taking things really, really seriously is one of the dangers of this particular hobby. You
Oh
know,
yes,
there's I love geek culture. I do. I'm a longtime member of the geek culture, but there is nowhere else than geek culture that cares whether Kirk or Picard was a better captain. Who cares? Neither of them exist. You know.
yes, yes,
You know, when people say, well, you know, that's not actually what red dragons do, they don't exist. They
yes.
can do anything. It's a game. Yeah. So yeah, I always like get myself worked up over these things, and I think, okay, give yourself a break. It's a game.
Yeah.
Is it fun? That's all it. Is it going to be fun? That's the big thing.
One of the exciting things for me too is, having a background where we played a lot of different RPGs. If we ever got into area where, people got too invested and too emotionally, connected to their characters or things like that, being able to pause and keep our schedule and play a different game, whether that was, we did a lot of Star Wars, we did Star Trek, we did a lot. Still be rolling the dice and role playing and everything, but in a completely different capacity. And it's so different. It's so varied from, fifth edition that it's like a restart button. I love it.
Yeah, there is enough variety, even as you say, between editions. Even if you're going to stay in an edition, to take a break and play. So I've got a homebrew campaign that my boys and I play, and my wife, and we're several weeks ahead of where my videos are because I didn't start making videos for a while. And I wanted to kind of close the gap on that because I start to forget. I'm recapping these things, but it was 2 months ago. Sometimes I don't remember. So I said, guys, how would you like to play the Horror on the Hill module?
Nice.
I very rarely do modules. I didn't when I was a kid, and because I couldn't afford to buy them, and I don't now. But I thought, what we'll do? We'll roll up a whole new set of characters. We'll just pause your 4 where they are. We'll roll up a whole new set of characters. We'll take them through Horror on the Hill. Then, when I'm getting close to catching up with the videos, then we'll restart the campaign and we can keep playing.
Yeah.
So, because it gives a break. You get to a point where you're really concerned about what this character is doing, and it's like, we need to step away. We need to step away for a little while.
Definitely.
I played Vampire when I was in high school, early university.
Same.
I can't remember the full name. It's Vampire the something.
Vampire the Masquerade.
That's it. That was a fun, gothic. That was a fun game. That was a really cool game.
Yeah, very much, very much.
I enjoyed that. One of the things I did on that one was when I designed the world we played in, I had us play essentially on the campus. So we all knew where things were and I didn't have to make a bunch of maps.
Right. Very smart.
That's really helpful.
Very smart. Well, I know we're running out of time a little bit.
We are.
And what are your closing thoughts on both story arc and dungeon design and how they rely on each other, help each other, and give us the kind of framework for what we do?
Something I was thinking about the other day was how you can go. I mean, I talked about very much about finding those high level things and letting it trickle down. And then I did just the opposite. Because my boys wanted to play the game. They never played before. I designed a dungeon thinking it would be a one-off, and then they wanted to keep playing. And so you can invert that relationship. It's possible to invert the relationship, invent the dungeon first, and then say, well, what kind of a society would make this thing, right? How do they relate? I think that my primary guiding principle in it is a cohesive language. I was thinking of the Lord of the Rings, the Weta Workshop folks, when they designed the armor for the elves. They wanted to make it look like the armor and the weapons came from the same world. And the armor, the weapons, the costumes, the buildings, everything needed to feel like it was part of the same world. And so I try to find that through line with my stuff so that you could conceivably stand on that beach and see those boats. And that as that fruit stand is being engulfed in lava, it isn't sticking out of the landscape like it doesn't belong there. The boat you're about to get on feels natural to the people who would buy their fruit at that fruit stand. They'd get on this boat. The design of it, the uses of it, the way people interact with each other fits. It works as a world. And that can be something as simple as, whenever you've got a dungeon entrance made by a certain group, You know, the orcs, they're always putting these skulls over their entrances, something like that. You know, things that tie in, or finding, you know, again, Tolkien, you know, the white hand of Saruman, right, or the red eye of Sauron, and that those things become
Staple.
touchstones. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they tie the world together, and they give you a mental map of where you are, because then when you pull from the micro to the macro, or go from macro to micro, it still feels right. It still feels like it is integrated. But maybe the biggest thing, maybe I keep saying my main thing, maybe the biggest thing is just have fun with it, right? You know, like, do it because it's cool, and then find a reason for it afterward.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
got to remind myself about that for that mage's tower I'm making.
All
Well,
right. Well, Father Aaron, thank you again for taking the time. I do appreciate it.
and
And
thank you, Joe, for setting this up. This is great.
yeah, absolutely. I think for us in the community, one of the biggest things we can do is just share in that community. So definitely meaningful for me. And don't hesitate anytime you need anything. Feel free, reach out, and I'll do the same.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much for setting this up, and you have yourself a good night.
You as well. I hope you enjoyed that video. Here's a link to another video that you may enjoy. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button to help us grow. If you'd like to support us, make sure you check out the description of the video with some links and leave a comment to let us know where will your adventures take you.